So time then for the press preview, a first look at what is on Sunday's front pages. Tonight we'll see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author Christina Patterson, also the Director of Communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Annabel Denham. And very good evening to both of you. We'll chat in a moment, but let's have a look at those front pages for you. First of all, we'll go through them, starting with the Observer, reporting that Conservative MPs will be ready to force Boris Johnson out within weeks if he tries to dodge responsibility for rule-breaking parties at number 10. Well, the Telegraph goes with the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie, photographed breaking COVID social distancing rules days after the public was warned it was critical to follow the guidance. All COVID restrictions in England will end in 10 days, according to the Sunday Express. The Mirror goes with Prince Andrew's lawyers wanting to question Virginia Giuffre's psychologist to find out whether she's suffering false memories of meeting him. The Duke of York denies the claims against him. And the Star leads with taxes on single-use plastics such as cutlery and balloons. And I'm joined by Christina and Annabel. Great to see you both this Saturday evening. Let's get stuck in then, Christina, starting with the Observer. There is certainly a sense, isn't there, that the public are furious about what has been going on in recent days. And now the Observer is reporting that the Tories will oust the Prime Minister if he tries to dodge Partygate blame following the report's findings from Sue Gray.
Yes, well, I must say it's almost funny that there are these constant ifs. That I think the Times front page today said last chance saloon, and it's if he's found to be evading responsibility. He's done nothing but evade responsibility since these stories first broke. He's consistently lied about them. He claimed to not know there were any parties. He claimed to be really, really shocked when the Allegra Stratton video emerged. And she is actually the only person who has resigned in this whole sorry business, and she didn't even go to any of the parties. He claimed that he was as horrified as the rest of the nation, and then drip, 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 the parties come out. I mean, it's just absolute non-stop party time at Downing Street. And he very clearly was, and said he was, at that party in the garden with trestle tables of sausage rolls and so on. So I really don't know what Tory MPs are waiting for. Clearly, well, I think what they're waiting for is to get a spine and to get a moral compass, because their constituents are able to express what those Tory MPs clearly aren't feeling, which is absolute horror that we have running our country a Prime Minister who is not only a pathological liar, which we knew before, but that he set rules, the most restrictive movements, limitations on people's movement in peacetime, so that people literally watched family dying on iPads. They watched their loved ones dying on iPads. They couldn't even hold their hands when they died. And meanwhile, it was party a go-go with DJs, drink, suitcases of booze, fridges, constant trips out to the Tesco at Westminster. So really, I think Tory MPs could just get a spot, but they very clearly didn't know.
I'm just going to break in because we are short of time, sadly, this evening, and I want to speak to Annabel in a moment. But the Prime Minister has apologised to the public in the Commons. Downing Street apologised to the Queen. He's called for an inquiry. Shouldn't we just wait to hear what that inquiry says? We'll know probably by the end of the week.
Well, he didn't apologise, did he? He absolutely didn't apologise. He basically said no rules were broken. It was a work due, which was certainly a category which didn't appear anywhere. Well, actually, it was very clear that there was no such thing as work due. You couldn't have a work party. Nobody in the country was allowed a work party. So he didn't apologise, number one. And sure, we can all wait for the Sue Gray report, but since we know he was at the party that was illegal, I can't really see what she's going to say, but fine. I mean, clearly, Tory MPs have no idea what to do. They don't have a replacement lined up. They don't know how to handle this whole thing. And so everybody's saying, we'll wait for the report. And anyway, Sue Gray's not going to pass judgment. She's her remit is to lay out the facts.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the facts are pretty clear already.
Rather than dish out sanctions, yeah. OK, let's move on to the Sunday Telegraph, Annabel. Carrie Johnson broke COVID rules, apparently. Now, you've read this story. What do you make of it? It happened in September 2020, I think. There were guidelines, weren't they, rather than strict rules? Am I right in saying?
Well, they were guidelines, but I think most people followed those guidelines, adhered to those guidelines pretty strictly, and will be. I mean, I'm looking at these headlines with my head in my hands. One can only imagine the depths of despair that the comms machine at number 10 have plunged to. I think the public are absolutely furious at all of this, and seeing images of the Prime Minister's wife with her arms around a friend at a time when that guidance was in place is certainly not going to help matters. But
she's not elected, though, is she? She's not elected.
Yes, and she isn't. It's the one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us might apply, but she wasn't the ones setting those rules. So the hypocrisy is not quite so galling for members of the public, I don't imagine. But I do think a problem that we're going to quickly run into here is that there are so many breaches by so many people in positions of privilege that we might soon lose sight of those that actually require further actions. Some Conservatives were slamming Keir Starmer, who seemed, at least from the footage I saw, to be having a quiet beer with a few colleagues. How much mud is going to be slung? And, should we really be focusing on the most egregious examples to ensure that the public doesn't become desensitized to what appears to be the really unconscionable behaviours?
Yeah, you make a good point. Let's move on to the front of the Sunday Express. Christina, Prime Minister ditches all rules, but will it save him? We're hearing that maybe in 10 days, all rules, all COVID restrictions will be lifted. I mean, that will be a huge relief to the country.
Well, you know what? I don't think it will. I think it's Tory MPs who get really upset about regulations during a pandemic, which are pretty light touch, actually. The only thing that's sort of left is for the advice of people to work from home if they can, and to wear masks in crowded spaces. It's not particularly onerous. I mean, I do think, generally speaking, it's better for people to be in an office if they can be. But, during a pandemic is not really the prime time. So I think this is really shocking. The fact that Boris Johnson is changing safety regulations during a pandemic to save his skin.
Well, we don't know that, Christina, do we? He'll be saying he's following the science.
Well, he doesn't really follow science, but the headline literally says it's to save him. It may be for other reasons, and if it's for other reasons, fine. These are the judgments he has to make. But if it is to placate himself with Tory MPs, and we know he's going all out with Operation Big Dog, the most horrifically named salvation operation ever. He is determined to save his own skin, according to all the sources, and it looks as if this is part of that process. I heard actually from a senior Tory MP this evening of another thing to do with the BBC licence fee, which may well have, may well be quite fierce, also in order to placate Tory MPs. So, it's. I think this is awful. This is not how policy should be made.
Annabel, we've only got 30 seconds. Where do you see this story in terms of the lifting of restrictions?
Sure, I'm afraid I share Christina's cynicism. Let's not forget that Boris Johnson deployed the dead cat strategy back in December to distract from the footage of Allegra Stratton laughing about parties in number 10. Now he's lifting Plan B restrictions, which would have been loathed in particular by Conservative backbenchers because they are coming under fire from their constituents, from their local associations, feeling immense pressure, worrying that they're not going to be re-elected in the next general election. But I don't think that we should underestimate the impact of Plan B restrictions and the fact that they could have cost us about £4 billion a month. They might represent small changes in individual behaviour, but those multiple small changes in individual behaviour can have quite an impact on the economy. So I certainly welcome them at a time when, and on a day when Omicron cases have hit their lowest in a month.
Yeah, OK. Sorry to have to rush you both along. We'll speak again in a moment. Coming up after the break, a look at the tsunami in Tonga, pictured here on the front of The Observer. Stay with us. Welcome back. Part two of the press preview. Christina and Annabel still with me. Annabel, why don't we have a look at the Sunday Mirror? Prince Andrew, trying to potentially quiz Virginia Giuffre's psychologist.
Yes, the Mirror has got a very unflattering splash talking about Andrew's memory and how stark that contrast is, his inability to remember certain facts or alleged facts from the past, alleged incidents in the past, compared with Virginia Giuffre's memory, which his lawyers are now calling into question. Of course, he's innocent until proven guilty, but front pages like this do give a good indication of Andrew's standing in the court of public opinion. I think it's very difficult to see how his reputation will recover from what has been a very troublesome, very difficult week for the prince. Of course, earlier this week, the Queen clearly put monarchy before motherhood by bringing down the guillotine on Andrew's royal career in a 90-minute meeting. The royal family quite obviously distancing themselves from this unfolding disaster. And I think in the coming weeks, if the decision is made not to settle this case as swiftly and quietly as possible, then we are going to see more headlines like this, more front page splashes like this in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, Christina, this story really isn't going away. It's been quite a week, hasn't it, for Prince Andrew?
Yes, it's been quite a week for Prince Andrew. It looks to me as if, well, I mean, I'm pleased that this is going to court, because I reviewed last year Julie K. Brown's book about Brian Epstein for the Sunday Times, and she's essentially the person who got him into prison and who is really responsible for getting Ghislaine Maxwell prosecuted, because people had refused to touch the case for years and years and years, and he had an extremely light sentence for a relatively minor crime, and it was her research that got the case kind of uncovered in this way. And what I have read about the Prince Andrew case does not sound good at all, and obviously he will fight this, but there has been this photo around for years. To claim he doesn't remember it and then accuse her of false memory syndrome seems just crazy to me. And I do feel very sorry for the Queen, but justice is justice. And if he has essentially raped Virginia Giuffre because she was underage at the time, then he should pay the price for that. And losing his reputation is the least of it, frankly. Yeah. If you commit a crime, you shouldn't just lose your reputation. You should actually be prosecuted and face more than that. But we'll see what happens. Yeah. But I think there is absolutely no choice than what the Queen has done.
And of course, we should just say once again, he does strenuously, as you did, strenuously deny all those allegations. And just very quickly, Annabel, literally in the last 10 seconds, this remarkable picture of the eruption in Tonga.
Yes, the blast that could be seen from space. Obviously at the moment we know very little. The US and Japan are advising people on the Pacific coastlines to get away from the shore as a precaution against tsunami waves. Japan has warned of waves as high as 3 meters. US warned of strong currents and waves, coastal flooding. So I think that, there's going to be more to come, and we just have to hope that the effects of this tsunami are not too catastrophic.